Well, good morning or good afternoon and welcome. We are again hosted by ICC, Make Climate Action Everyone's Business Forum at COP27. And today with this excellent panel of experts from the Southern Cone, we will be discussing from adaptation to mitigation on how the financial incentives for nature-based solutions in developing countries can be part of the solution to climate change. Next, please. So GPS is a network, and the people today, the experts today sharing this presentation with us are all members from the different countries that form GPS, which is a network that was established in 2012 of private entities from Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina, related to food security, seeking to contribute to the integration of the Southern Cone countries and their international projections as part of the solution to food security and to the development of a secure world. The integration of GPS includes institutions, experts, and entrepreneurs that are committed to contributing to the setting of a South American pole capable of meeting the increased food demand sustainably, as well as generating wealth and employment in the region. Next, please. So GPS develops its work in 4 areas that are geopolitics of food, regional integration, agribusiness and international development, trade, finance, and investment. And of course, what gathers us here today, which is climate change, agricultural sustainability, and the necessary changes in the management of ecosystems, both productive or natural. Next, please. So as I was mentioning, we have a great panel of speakers today that will be going in depth in the key aspects of our presentation. We have with us Fabiana Alves, which is from Brazil. She's the executive director of Wholesale at Rabobank and leads the key clients in the food and agribusiness sector of this institution in Brazil. Over 30 years experience in agribusiness, which include being a farmer and being part of the food industry in Brazil. She's also a member of the board that's been in charge for many years of different areas at Rabobank. And her areas cover TCF, trade commodity finance, value chain finance, mergers and acquisitions, and major agri-clients. She has a degree in agronomic engineering from Viçosa and a graduate business administration from Fundación Getúlio Vargas and an MBA from the University of California. We also have from Uruguay, Francisco Rosas, which is a professor of economics and chair in econometrics and statistics at Ort University in Uruguay, and a senior researcher or research fellow and partner at the Centro de Investigaciones Económicas in Uruguay. He has a PhD in economics from Iowa State University and a Bachelor of Arts in economics from Universidad de la República in Uruguay. His areas of interest are applied microeconomics, policy analysis, and conducts research in agriculture and natural resource economics, production, and other key areas. He has worked also in projects within the National System of Researchers and is member of the Australian Studies Center. Next, please. We also have with us Carmen Longa Virasoro from Argentina. She's a law graduate from the University of Buenos Aires and also a law and environmental management professor, both at private and public universities. She has developed intensive work under different institutions like IADB, the World Bank, the GIC of Germany, the CAF Development Bank of South America. She was also one of the leaders of the G20 in Buenos Aires, leading the climate change sustainability group from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And she has vast experience in the design, implementation, monitoring of different intercultural programs and projects, and has a record of integrity of integrating these skills to achieve broad-ranging environmental and social objectives. She's an active board member of several institutions with a focus on gender, cultural heritage, and human development. She's one of the founding members of Carbon Group Climatic Solutions and also director. Carlos Gentile is head of sustainability of sustainable development of the Fundación Argentina Global. He also works as an advisor in the National Senate and is also a consultant and partner at CICLA Consulting. He's an agricultural engineer from the University of Buenos Aires, has a graduate degree in democracy and public policy from London School of Economics, and was Secretary of State for Climate Change and Sustainable Development from 2015 to 2019. He was the creator and coordinator of the National Climate Change Cabinet. He was also chairman of the G20 Climate Sustainability Group in 2018 and of the Global Council of the 10-Year Framework for Sustainable Production and Consumption. And before that, he was member of the Ministry of Education of the city of Buenos Aires, leading the Green Schools program. Well, myself, I'm a founding member of GPS, also director of Carbon Group Agroclimatic Solutions, and I'm also a consulting member of CARI, professor at ITBA, the Buenos Aires Institute of Technology, and KIT, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Also member of ICC Argentina's Climate Change and Energy Commission and the Working Group on Carbon Pricing. Next, please. So the idea today is to review and to understand how under this tension context that the world has and seems to not be simplifying with food insecurity and global warming as two key threats, our countries, developing countries, may hold the key to solving this dichotomy. However, on many occasions, countries like ours, other developing countries with vast natural resources and enormous productive capacity are highly unstable, and the private sector, private actors have trouble finding the financial resources they need to invest in ecosystem source stewardship, its restoration, and of course sequestration both in soils and biomass. So during 2021, global incentives like COP27 or the UN Food Systems Summit have stressed the importance and need to modify these systems. So then this panel today, with presentations from different countries of the Mercosur region, we will discuss options for financial markets and mechanisms such as those under Article 6 that we think will allow to provide incentives for private actors in developing economies to adopt nature-based solutions and practices that address both food security and climate solution issues. Next, please. So as key takeaways, we think that to understand and debate on these mechanisms will be important, and also we would like to raise awareness on the importance of providing adequate framework policies and incentives, right? So that it will allow our countries and our region to improve the capacity of our ecosystems to produce under the lowest emissions possible, and at the same time to conserve and sequester as much carbon as possible. Next, please. So in order to kick, the first round of presentations, I would like for us to keep in mind this, which is the Paris Accord 1.5 pathway. This was presented initially as an idea during 1.5 IPCC special report. However, this document comes from the private sector, and it's part of the work that we're doing at ICC and specifically from the ICC Climate Hub Exponential Roadmap. And as you can see here, all sectors must reach zero emissions by 2050, but at the bottom where the food and nature-based sources are, and to the right-hand side, these emitting sources, those emissions that come from our ecosystems and how we manage them, including deforestation and including our grazing management, all that must turn into long-term storage of carbon in our ecosystem. So this is a huge challenge for our countries because, next please, because what happens is that our countries need to do massive investments to keep their role as global food securities and also to be part of the solution to climate change. Why? Because the total added surface of land that these countries occupy is only second to Russia in a global scale. So it's a very large percentage of the surface of land on the planet. And our countries have been very important in developing technologies to make this production better and more sustainable. And also they occupy a top position as key net exporters. It's the most important region as key net exporters. So these 4 countries and the rest of Latin America need to make massive investments to remain a key player in the Paris Accord pathway that you just saw, and remain as the world's main net food exporter, supporting other countries that might need eventually to import part of their food supply. But I wanted to point just 2 examples of the difficulties that we have in the region and put it on our own head, like Argentina. Argentina passed the forest law to conserve its 53 million hectares of natural forest in 2007. But a recent study shows that of the total fund that's received by the national government, only less than 5% of that money is reaching the provinces where these forests are. So we think that that is a huge problem where the taxes are being paid. This is a 2% tax on exports of ag commodities, which is a heavy burden for farmers, but all that money, more than 95% of that, it's not reaching its real actors that need that money. And the second thing is that we have very high inflation and very high sovereign risk that makes our country very unattractive for investments. But if we don't do those investments, I'm pretty sure, and a lot of people think that the world will not be able to keep on track with that 1.5 degree pathway. So I would like to pass the microphone and to our colleague Carmen Longa Virasoro that will make the initial presentation on gender and other social aspects. Next slide, please. Please, Carmen.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to share with you these approaches and these perspectives with reference to gender-sensitive climate finance for adaptation, an issue which is, as we all know, of high value to go forward with good nature-based solutions projects and programs. Next, please. So the topics that I will be sharing with you today refer to gender. How is the position of gender under the UNFCCC, the Enhanced Lima Work Program and its Gender Action Plan, what is happening with the National Gender and Climate Change focal points, what is happening with gender in the NDCs, what about the contribution of global international assistance in gender-related support, and do we have gender equality markets for climate finance, and then to wrap up, identifying some of the limitations and opportunities that we have to go forward to accomplish the very ambitious goals that we have to reach the 23 gigatons of emission reductions by 2030. Next, please. Even if at the Rio Convention, the UNFCCC Convention was the only one that didn't have gender in its wording, from 2001 on, we have over 60 gender mandates that cover a lot of areas of the negotiation. We can, we have gender mandates on adaptation and mitigation, on technology, capacity building, finance and others. So, and the ways in which those mandates are integrating gender are also various. So we have gender equality, we have mainstreaming, how to balance gender and women as vulnerable groups, not forgetting the issue of how to get women into high-level positions that make the decisions to accomplish our ambitious goals. So it's a good source to get all that information is the Gender Climate Tracker, which I recommend. Next, please. So we, after 2001, we advance with the Lima Work Program on Gender, which even if it wasn't a normative one, it's a very powerful guideline. And we have the key concepts that the Lima Work Program has is gender equality, a vital resource for gender mainstreaming, because we would need to get all the relevant targets and goals in all the activities under the convention. And that will be a very important contribution to increase the effectiveness, as well as its fairness and sustainability. And the other topic of the Lima Work Program is to appreciate the gender differentiated impacts, because we need to acknowledge that owing to historical and current gender inequalities, our countries, mainly our developing countries and local communities, are in need of very specific contributions and modalities to make those communities and women communities go forward. So, considering the relevant dimensions, we need to take into account the imperatives of the just transition. And with the just transition, we need to identify that women have been set up in the wording as part of the vulnerable groups. That is a concept that we are progressing from vulnerable groups to a more equity-prone approach. Next, please. So when we look at what does the action plan look like? What are the priority areas and which of those are important for our nature-based solution programs and projects? You will see that every one of them has a very important role in our nature-based solutions approach, because we will need capacity building, knowledge management, and communication. And this point is especially important, taking into account that there will be some funding for capacity building in the negotiation of Article 6.2. So we'll need to take that into account. We will use the Gender Action Plan to leverage that capacity building for women, business women, and their communities. The other question is gender balance, participation in women's leadership. We have an issue there because as gender balance is not defined, there will be a struggle in the negotiations for the taxonomy of gender balance that becomes a more just participation of women in all the bodies and the decision-making bodies of the convention and of the related parties. The question of coherence, it's very important to build coherence between the climate convention issues related to gender and the other UN related agencies. The two other points, gender responsiveness, responsive implementation, and the means of implementation, that is a key issue, and we will need additional resources, financial resources, and technical resources, so that this point of the action plan can move forward. The last point, in my view, is crucial because we need science-based decisions, and we need to monitor and report in order to feed those data, those items of data into our action plans. Next, please. A quick reference to the focal points. So far, we have 94 focal points in the different countries, and in COP2, 22, 25, and 26, there have been important and relevant decisions to move that participation of most of the countries and support of the countries to the national focal points. Next, please. What is happening with gender in the NDCs? We see that we can identify several issues that are appearing in the NDCs. Not all countries are stating their gender activities or gender goals in their NDCs. So it's important to broaden and to highlight and to strengthen the references to gender with respect to commitments to mitigation and adaptation. Again, the old topic of women as a group that is vulnerable, the question of women becoming beneficiaries of projects and policies, and the new but very important emerging topic of women as agents of change and stakeholders. So this all adapts to the sensitivity to gender streaming. It is a very important topic. Argentina has a consideration of gender sensitivity in its NDC. Next, please. As
2 minutes, Carmen.
Yeah, as time is running short, I would just like to highlight that increasing the transparency and the accountability is our main priority. And if we see what is the international cooperation assistance doing to help us move forward, we see that only 8.6 of the overseas development assistance is going to gender sensitive issues. This needs to become a stronger modality on the part of the OECD countries. Next, please. We see that the gender equality assistance has remained stable for the last year. So, as I said, this needs to move up. Next, please. Just a quick mention to the very important tool of the Adaptation Fund. The Adaptation Fund has a gender policy adaptation policy gender policy, that is very much aligned to the Paris Agreement, and that will be instrumental in working it, in making our work plan go forward with success. And next, please, let's pass on that. The next one, please. So, in short, what is our recommendation? We need technical and financial assistance. We need to increase transparency, accountability for climate finance for women, provided by developed countries for our nature-based solutions projects and programs. Thank you very much.
Very interesting, Carmen. Thank you very much. It's an absolutely critical and important topic that you just mentioned. We will follow with Francisco. Francisco, the microphone is yours, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm with the Universidad of Uruguay and Centro de Investigaciones Económicas in Uruguay. Thank you for having me. Next, please. And I will talk about climate finance and agriculture. Well, there is an increasing awareness of the effects of climate risk on financial stability and price stability. This is so because the dynamics of the environment, the society, the economy, and the geopolitics interact in a non-linear and unpredictable way. And these dynamics may irreversibly be transformed by the growing concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. These climate-related risks arise in this context. And this issue is gaining relevance at different levels of analysis, and I will discuss that at the macroeconomic levels for governments and for two sectors like the financial sector and agriculture, especially at the farm level. Next, please. So in the last report of the World Economic Forum of 2022 of global risk assessments, the perception of about 1,000 experts and global leaders found that about the three main risks by their impacts are related to the environment. So this is something crucial in the context of our panel. Next, please. So how are we exposed to these risks? Well, there are risks of physical impacts, those risks coming from economic cost or financial losses due to weather-related events, extreme events mainly. And there are also risks of transition to a low-carbon economy. These certain financial impacts due to policy changes, reputational impacts, technological breakthroughs, or shifts in consumer preferences. And also these risks interact within each other, making some important trade-offs. Next, please. So I will discuss this first in terms of the governments. So governments are, of course, called into action to mitigate these risks, and mainly in two ways. First, integrating both climate and financial risks as a public good, and also incorporating climate risks into the fiscal and monetary policy. And I will give an example just to illustrate of something that has happened a few weeks ago, illustrating this in the case of Uruguay. Next, please. It is the issuance of a sustainability-linked bond as part of the sovereign debt strategy of the country. Next, please. In which the country has issued this bond as part of different type of bonds that are considered related to climate finance by, for example, the International Capital Market Association principles given to governments or to companies to issue this type of bonds. Next, please. So what this bond has in particular is that the coupon of the bond, that means the interest rates paid by the bond, are linked to two key performance indicators. These indicators are, in this case, the percentage change of aggregate GHG emissions per unit of GDP relative to a baseline. And the second key performance indicator is the maintenance of forest areas with respect also to baseline year. The sustainable performance, the key performance indicators, they have some commitments, some targets that are consistent with those of the NDCs. Next, please. Within the bond characteristics, there are a pricing mechanism that is incentive compatible, because there is a coupon step up, which means an increase in the interest rates, in the case the government is not accomplishing these targets, and a step down in the case the country is actually achieving those targets. Next, please. Now I will turn to the financial sector and how it's dealing or is affected by climate risks. First, there is an increasing awareness of the exposition of the financial sector to the climate risks. It's receiving increasing pressure from stakeholders, but also sees an opportunity in climate finance. Next, please. So how is the financial sector exposed to the climate risk? Well, it's similar to other sectors, exposed to physical impacts and also to risk of transition to low carbon economy. And that is occurring in a direct way, but also in an indirect way through their own customers, because they are actually affected or affect the climate change. And as part of their strategies to mitigate this type of risks, one of them is to intervene in the portfolio mix. So the type of investment the financial institutions do to lean towards more green projects. The next, please. So there is where opportunities arise in different sectors of the economy, and I will discuss those in the case of agriculture and forestry. Next, please. So farmers, like at the micro level, they are called for action to identify and to adopt technologies that help them hedge or mitigate this type of risks. And I will illustrate in the case of Uruguay a few cases. For example, in the livestock sector. In livestock production, there are technologies available to improve productivity, to improve management of native grasslands, to change livestock diets, to enhance livestock genetics, which are all conceived as mitigation or adaptation strategies. And farmers require funding for performing these activities and to adopt these type of technologies. And these technologies are actually, as I said before, mitigating or adaptation or updating technologies. Next, please. This happens similarly in crops, for example, to increase the frequency of pasture in crop sequences, to use low-release nitrogen fertilizers, to use precision agriculture or supplementary irrigation, similarly in forestry production by increasing area of forest. These are all technologies of mitigation and adaptation that farmers require to adopt to hedge those risks, those climate risks, but also require funding from financial institutions to actually do that. Next, please. So these technologies—
You have 2 minutes, Francisco.
Perfect. These technologies are stated in Uruguayan NDC of 1917, NDC 1, and also in Uruguayan 2050 climate change long-term strategy. And the government as so has been supporting those technologies and adoption of those technologies through various public policies or actions. But my point here is that climate finance is actually an opportunity, or there is an opportunity for climate finance to fund this type of projects, this type of technologies, because they have environmental attributes, in this case, climate related, that are in line with those required by the financial institutions. So as I'm phrasing this is also an incentive compatible, because we see that there is a benefit for the government, for the financial institutions, as well as for farmers. Next, please. So to conclude, I want to remark that climate risk affects an economy at different levels. Firstly, governments are calling to action to integrate both climate and financial risks as a public good, to incorporate climate risks into their own fiscal and monetary policy. I gave an example of fiscal and monetary policy. In the case of Uruguay, financial sector is calling to action in 2 levels: to integrate risk, to monitoring and regulating duties from central banks, but also financial institutions to provide to fund green projects or provide green financial instruments. This is an opportunity for them as well. And finally, farmers to identify and adopt mitigation and adaptation technologies, which in doing so, we are looking at the micro foundations of the solution to the problem of climate risks. Next, please. I leave you with a few references for this talk, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Very interesting, very important points, and showing how Uruguay is integrating this global perspective of the sustainability-linked loan to the farmers' grassroots level view of sustainability and grazing land management. Thanks. So to continue with today's program, we have Fabiana. And Fabiana, well, the microphone is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here in this very important forum representing Rabobank, which is a member of the Brazilian Agriculture Association, ABAC. Well, Rabobank has this very ambitious mission of growing a better world together. And therefore, we understand that our responsibility on addressing the current challenges regarding sustainability, and especially related with the F&A chain. Next. While in the Netherlands, we are a multiple bank, outside of the Netherlands, internationally, Rabobank is pretty much focused on the food and agricultural chains, which leads us to the fact that South America is a very important region for our strategy, representing 20% of our results outside of the Netherlands, and also reinforces the aspect that the South America already said here, that South America is a key region for the food security, global food security, and therefore for the global sustainability as well. Next. We have been already done a lot since 2018. Rabobank has focused on increasing its sustainable finance instruments and have promoted amongst our clients the usage of KPIs related with financials, with credit and financing activities in order to promote the sustainability throughout the chain. Those are some of the examples, and there are more than $8 billion in sustainable linked loans and bonds and performed by us along these years. But we understand that we have to be very careful of how actually we create commitments throughout the financial instruments. Next, please. We have been focusing on KPIs or performance indexes across all the ESG dimensions. For instance, in increased renewable energy, reduce the carbon footprint, traceability on the supply chain, a very important one, reduce water consumption reduction, certifications, biofertilizers, human rights, also very important, as Carmen mentioned, also to promote a diverse and inclusive companies, increasing the number of women in leadership roles, and also to increase the ability of the borrowers to maintain a safe and healthy workplace free of injuries, illness, or fatalities. So those are some of the examples of KPIs that we have been using along these years to create commitment from our clients that would then benefit from having a green financing solution. However, next, we understand that the challenge is really large. Nowadays, if we look from today to 2050, and the challenge of feeding almost 10 billion people, we understand that we would have to increase in 50% the calories that we produce on our global food and agriculture chain. Well, if we keep doing this as business, as we have been doing as business as usual, we would probably increase the impact, the carbon impact of the food production from 12 gigatons a year to 15. And that's not acceptable, and that's not only desirable, but acceptable or manageable. The role, the key responsibility that we have now is to drop this impact to 4 gigaton the most if we are to commit with the 2 degrees global warming limit. But if we are to aim at 1.5, we would have to make the F&A chain at 0. Next. And that poses a huge challenge for the financial industry, right? Because we have to come up with solutions that can cope with the investment opportunity that we see behind this challenge. A 300 to 350 billion euros investment a year will be necessary actually to make that transition in terms of carbon impact. And we have to address that from different lenses. We have to take into consideration forest and land users, consumption, food waste, food loss and food waste, which is a huge source of carbon emissions as well, and also the production itself. And last but not least, solutions to compensate the final emissions, which of course are related with standardizing and structuring the carbon market on globally wide. Next, please. That's why Rabobank has been putting innovation on the top of its agenda and creating solutions for each one of those links on our journey towards the dream of being net positive, of having a portfolio that is net positive. And these, we believe, that should be the same case for all the financial industry. The whole financial industry must be committed with creating new solutions for credit and for supporting those investments, always focusing on our mission to contribute for this net zero, which is a huge challenge. Next. So as Francisco already mentioned, there are two ways, two methodologies to structure, integrate sustainability in financing. We have the sustainability linked solutions, where we have margins adjustments linked to achieved of pre-agreed KPIs, sustainable KPIs, 2 to 5 sustainable KPIs. And these KPIs, of course, should be material for the borrowers and core sustainability and business strategy. And they must address the relevant environmental, social, or governance challenges of that industry. And the second instruments are financial instruments earmarked to eligible investments, where the proceeds and used to finance investments are sustainably certified by an external party, and they relate to business activities as defined in respective sustainable finance guidelines or principles. So those are the green loans and the social loans, and they must follow the green loans principles and the social loan principles. Meaning that in some sources, the financial industry is already structuring itself and has been striving for follow that challenge. However, next please, when we talk about the challenges, we also talk about opportunities and benefits of those sustainable finance.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Have our opportunity to actually build a strong relationship with all the stakeholders, maintain the access to capital, create a positive impact on reputation and credibility while contributing for this challenge, promote price benefits and the implementation of sustainable linked loans, which require standards and framework globally accepted in order to have the loan documentation and classification as easy as possible. And of course, there are the aspect of increasing the interest and the engagement of the financial industry employees, which value the most and see the sustainable development as an important part of their personal lives and ambitions. Next, please. Well, so these are some of the practices that we have already been widely used in South America, such as non-tillage. Next, please. Integration with forest, biochemicals, or in regenerative farming. And we expect that the financial industry can contribute for them to be recognized and acknowledged in the next standards and the taxonomy that it's up to be approved and to be negotiated globally. Because we understand that we need to have global goals and common goals, but we need to adapt the standards for the regions where the agriculture is the main activity and is sourcing and is supplying the world. So I would like to end my my comments saying that we acknowledge that there are next, please, many actions on to address these challenges. But I would like to enhance three specifically aspects that need to be addressed very fast in order to allow the financial industry to deliver its contribution, which are the international taxonomy and standards to make possible to have a global communication. We can actually talk the same language and monitor the same aspects. We need investors and consumers education. There should be no differentiation in food, cheap food and sustainable food. Food should be sustainable, and that's all. And also, we strive for the day that there would be no green investment. All investments should be green, because in the end of the day, ESG should be part of the business strategy along the whole F&A chain. And that should be always supported and promoted and enhanced by the financial industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabiana. Very interesting and good to have a final talk on our own actions. Carlos, it's your turn now. We are really happy to have you and to listen to your comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thanks the ICC and the GPS for the invitation. So next, please. The Argentina emissions profile is mainly have energy and have agriculture, forestry, and other land use follow. In 2016, Argentina emitted 364 megatons of CO2 equivalent. The two sectors that contributed the most were the energy sector, 51%, and the follow, 39%. And together they represent 90% of the total emissions. Due to the methodological change in the IPCC inventory guidelines, as of the 2014 inventory, an 8% reduction in emissions from the follow sector was noted. Since then, the above amounts of percentages have remained relatively stable. Agricultural exports are one of Argentina's main activities, and the sector needs to grow, so the coupling growth and emission is a real challenge for us. Next, please. Beyond being responsible for 0.8 of global emission, Argentina in 2016 ceased to be a reactive country to climate change to become a proactive country. It withdrew from the like-minded negotiating group and formed a new group with Uruguay and Brazil. In 2016, the National Cabinet of Climate Change was created as a political platform to articulate the national climate change policy among the main national ministries and government secretariats. And in this year, it was the first country to revise its NDC by presenting a more ambitious one. In 2020, Argentina presented a new NDC more ambitious than the previous one. Next, please. Within the framework of the National Climate Change Cabinet, 7 sectorial plans were developed. One of them was the National Action Plan for Agriculture and Climate Change, which aimed to implement adaptation and mitigation measures, prioritizing the adaptation actions due to the high exposure of the sector and the high incidence of the negative impacts of climate change. The plan was prepared jointly by the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture, together with the private sector, in the framework of the National Cabinet of Climate Change. The mitigation measures committed under this plan were a conditional nature based on the need for technology transfer and mainly external financing. Those measures were increased forested area, reach a 50-50 proportion of area planted with cereals and oil seeds, and the utilization of biomass for energy generation. Next, please. Another of the sectorial plans was the National Forestry and Climate Change Action Plan, which defined 10 strategic pillars. The structural pillars aim to overcome the barriers to implement the operational pillars: governance, strengthening of local communities, management, control and monitoring, valuation of native forests, and knowledge management. The operational pillars were associated with specific mitigation actions like land use planning, sustainable forest management, conservation in productive landscape, forest restoration and recovery, and forest fire prevention. This sector was, after the energy sector, the one that proposed to reduce the greatest amount of emissions unconditionally. Next, please. As I mentioned above, Argentina set out to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. For this purpose, it was worked, and is currently working, on the elaboration of a long-term low-emission strategy based mainly on the energy and agro sectors. As can be seen in the graph, which starts from the NDC of 2016 values, to achieve the proposed goal, it is necessary to generate an urgent turning point in the curve and decrease emissions abruptly. In a country like Argentina, with the radical importance of the agricultural sector as the engine of the economy and generator of employment, it requires a huge technological change and an unprecedented level of investment. Next, please. Within this framework, the country must generate all possible conditions so that this sector can develop and generate employment, while at the same time moving along the path of the decarbonization, for which they must reduce the intensity of their emission per unit of product and capture carbon. In this sense, government must ensure that all projects that reduce emission, avoid emission, or capture carbon can be carried out. To fulfill this purpose, it must make existing tools more efficient and generate new tools. Next, please. The Native Forest Law created a fund for the compensation of environmental services provided by forest. Since the enactment of the law, this fund has been constituted with much less financing than that provided for in the law. Therefore, this financing should be increased. On the other hand, the time that elapses between the transfer of the funds and the receipt by the producers should be greatly accelerated. The guidelines of the projects presented should also be complied with so that the funds go specifically to fund projects that contribute to environmental services and, in this case, avoid emissions, making the law work as a tool to promote good practices. Finally, the provinces must speed up the rendering of pending accounts. Next, please. Another mechanism is a result-based payment of the UN RED mechanism. The country achieved, after a long process, the recognition of 165 million tons of CO2 equivalent for avoided deforestation in the period of 2014 to 2016, obtaining $82 million in result-based payment for 10% of avoided emissions. However, the process is being carried out very slowly, with the provinces having submitted very few projects. As with the aforementioned tool, the provinces should accelerate the generation of quality projects that avoid to reduce emissions. On the other hand, there's a remainder of those 82 million that could be used to generate a mechanism to leverage low rates loans to promote nature-based solutions projects. And the government must define what to do with the remaining 90% of the recognized credits. Next, please, and the last one. Regarding market mechanisms, the fine print of Article 6 was finalized in Glasgow. Also, some discussions are still pending, with the wording that punishes governments that were most ambitious in their NDCs, since only those reductions that exceed the targets can be authorized under the Article 6.4. In order to obtain external financing to leverage carbon reduction projects, with additionally, and at the same time to be able to guarantee as a country the fulfillment of its NDC targets, it is necessary to know the abatement cost of the different projects. One possible strategy is to create an internal voluntary market which can contribute to the knowledge of the price of the different projects and promote an increase in the price of credits generated in the country, attracting a significant volume of projects. The government could also promote the sale of credits through Article 6.4 of those projects that reduce large volumes of emissions, but have costs that cannot be paid with the voluntary market prices, and need a higher price only possible, at least so far, with the purchase by companies operating in the regulated markets. This could be a possible path to maximize the implementation of projects that contribute to the decarbonization of the most emitting sectors of the country. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Martín.
Thank you. Well, very interesting. We're just running out of time. I think we had an excellent view from public sector. You were very generous, Carlos, in mentioning your own experience and how these instruments can be put to work for a better future. Also seeing from Francisco the vision of Uruguay and its positioning on these strategies. Fabiana, very interesting as well from the banking industry. Rabobank has been so important in our region that it's really great to have you here. And Carmen, from this vision of society and the importance of leadership, especially from a gender perspective for our future. So thank you very much. And this is where we end, and see you around at Sharm el Sheikh during the last 2 weeks of COP.